Coming up, could Jalen Hurts transfer from Alabama? And is a top destination already emerging? We'll talk about it all next right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Season may be over. That doesn't mean that things are in any way slowing down around the SEC. We've already got movement for 2018. We've got some possible movement for 2018. Some guys coming into the league, some guys on their way out, plenty of rumors. It's just another day around the SEC.
Lots of quarterback talk, obviously, and I just think it's crazy to talk about some of these transfers, and obviously we'll get into it a little bit down the road, but like you said, no shortage of topics for sure.
Let me start it off the way we always do. Item number 1 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. You know, on yesterday's show, we talked about what Lane Kiffin had said on the Dan Patrick Show, that he thought that the emergence of Tua Tagovailoa means that Jalen Hurts could transfer out of the program. Kiffin went even so far as to suggest had Tua not played in the national championship game, he might have bolted the door there in Tuscaloosa. So the idea is kind of out there that maybe Jalen Hurts is going to look for a new home, that maybe Tua's rise in the national championship game means the end of the Hurts era there in Tuscaloosa. A little bit surprising here that Greg McElroy, the former Alabama quarterback, the SEC Network analyst, he's on the Dan Patrick Show. And on that show, Patrick brings up what Kiffin said and asks asks McElroy about Hurts if he thinks a transfer is a possibility. I'm very surprised here at just how specific McElroy gets about all of this, really kind of diving headfirst into the rumor pond. Here is Greg McElroy, a former Bama quarterback, talking about the next potential move for the current Bama quarterback, Jalen Hurts. Take a listen.
I think that that's a very real possibility. He's from Texas, and the Texas Longhorns are in the quarterback market. It's hard to go to a guy and say, you know, hey, do you mind playing outside linebacker? Are you good moving to running back? Just not a lot of guys take kindly to that move, especially at the collegiate level. And I do think that it would be very interesting. He'd be a sought-after guy, having all the experience that he had, and knowing that the year to really focus and hone in on his skills, and still would have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So I think it's Tua's show moving forward.
So I don't deny that's probably true. It may be Tua's show going forward. At least that's the impression you get for right now. And by the way, once again, that was from the Dan Patrick Show. I don't have a hard time believing that. But man, Mike, this is all happening really fast. A couple days ago, Jalen Hurts was the Sugar Bowl player of the game. 2016, he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. And here we are on a Tuesday talking about him going to Texas. I mean, this has all happened pretty fast here.
I think that's why I opened it with so, and I said it's kind of shocking when you get into some of these quarterback conversations that you would have headlines on January 10th, 2018. Can you imagine January 10th, 2017, if we'd have said Jacob Eason is maybe transferring, Jalen Hurts maybe. I mean, you got to laughed out the building if you'd have tried to think this was coming down the road. And I know there's a tough decision coming up for Jalen Hurts. I think it would probably be in his best interest to look elsewhere in terms of what's going on with the quarterback race. I think that Nick Saban will do everything he can to keep him on campus. I think they understand that they're thin at the quarterback position moving forward. I think that you try to get Jalen to stick around and go through spring ball and tell him he has an opportunity to win his job back, and I think he does. But from what we saw from Tua, from the upside that Tua has, I don't know that there's a spot for Jalen Hurts being a starting quarterback again at Alabama. So tough decision ahead. I think the decision Jalen has to ask himself in his own mind is, do I want to get to the NFL, and does it have to be as a quarterback? Maybe a position change could be done at Alabama. I think he could be a good player elsewhere. But I wouldn't be shocked to see Texas on the list. I wouldn't be shocked to see a place like FAU on the list, with obviously Lane Kiffin being down there at that job. But I think you have to find somewhere to land, and obviously with only 1 year of eligibility remaining, when he transfers to a D1 program, it's got to be a good spot that he knows he'll play at.
David Penix in the comments section, there are a lot of comments coming in for right now, says Tua is for real, but I don't see Hurts leaving. And there is, I guess to a certain extent, I almost agree with David's comment there. Not that I don't see Hurts leaving. I think there's a chance he may eventually. I just think that all of this, as some people are also suggesting in our comment section, this is all happening really fast right now, almost too fast. Because, listen, I think that Tua is likely the real deal. If you've been a long-time viewer to this program, I was calling for Tua to be the Alabama quarterback even before the start of last season. I just think he's a better, more complete quarterback than what Jalen Hurts probably is. But these things have a way of evolving over time. And I think it's really important not to put like too much stock in what is essentially just 2 quarters of football.
Right.
And in those 2 quarters, I think that Tua looked more capable than I think Hurts has ever looked. But, Hurts has a lot more track record on the field than Tua does. Be careful about the last thing you saw, and be careful about the sort of small amount of evidence that you saw from Tua compared to the larger set from Jalen Hurts. There are some things about Tua that's obviously I'm going to like better than I like about Hurts. But to write off Hurts this quickly to the point of, hey, yeah, maybe he should just go to Texas, I think that's putting the cart way before the horse.
Well, I just think that in this day and age in football, you have to make those decisions quickly. If you're a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, and obviously a guy like Jacob Eason's in the same boat, you're going to have to sit out a year, and you're going to have 1 year remaining. So the quicker you can get in a program and the quicker you can make a decision like that, the more it benefits you as a player. And so that's why I think that you start, everybody's having this fallout from the national championship game. Tua plays lights out in the second half. You see the arm talent. You saw Georgia's defense start to loosen up a little bit at the second level. It allowed the running game to get going a little better. I just think the upside for Tua, and thinking about Tua leading that offense for 3 more years, I think the upside's there. So that Jalen Hurts does not have to ride the bench, I just think he will look at all his options.
Logan Tate says, I say start Tua at quarterback, put Jalen Hurts at tailback. He'd be another Kenyon Drake, just needs to bulk up. Here's the thing, Logan. Let's say that you did move Jalen Hurts to another position. He's obviously a great athlete. I mean, it pains me to say this, but I saw Hurts make Roquan Smith miss in one-on-one situations. Yeah. That's how good of a runner he is. Roquan, who I haven't seen miss a tackle all season long, I saw Jalen make him miss a couple times, and Jalen Hurts is a really good runner. But here's the issue. If you put Hurts in another position, it may work out fine for Alabama on the field. Saban and Brian Dable are going to get trashed in recruiting. Don't be a dual threat quarterback and go to Alabama. They're going to try to get you to play running back. They're going to try to get you to play wide receiver. They're going to try to get you to play H-back or whatever position they're going to try to get you to do. And y'all may say that's unfair. This is recruiting. Behind the scenes, that is a full contact, hand-to-hand combat type business here. There is something. I hate to use the word political. I can't think of a different word. There's a political issue when you move a quarterback to another position, in that people are going to look at Alabama as the school that moved a dual threat quarterback to running back, and it becomes really hard to get the next dual threat quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all fair in recruiting. I mean, you can't sit here and tell me for 1 minute that a guy like Nick Saban or even a guy like Dan Mullen didn't go into Justin Fields' house and be like, "You're going to play pro-style quarterback. You're not going to be a dual." That's so. It is all fair when in terms of recruiting, and I think there will be some people that point to that. I just think that you look at what Tua is, and I think that Saban can point to this and say, listen, you know what? If you're good enough to play at Alabama, I will put you on the field. He has shown time and time again in the middle of the national title game, that doesn't matter how old you are, if you have the talent to be on the field, that he will put you in the game. So I think that's a check mark back in Alabama's direction at that point.
Esteban Estevez says Tua is great, but he played against a tired Georgia defense that didn't have enough gas in the tank. If he would have played the first half, Tua wouldn't have had such a start. Esteban, I don't really agree with that. I don't know how tired the Georgia defense was in the second half of the national championship game. And the truth is that, for whatever reason, I don't know the X's and O's well enough to explain this, Georgia was able to dial up some pressures and some coverages against Baker Mayfield that had him baffled in the second half, and they couldn't do that against Tua Tagovailoa. I'm not telling you that Tua is better than Baker Mayfield, but he certainly handled the Georgia defense for the time that he was in there better than Baker Mayfield did for the full complement of time he played against him the week before.
I think there's actually a side topic to this to talk about. And I mentioned yesterday the play of Alex Leatherwood. When Jonah Williams left at left tackle, I think the blocking got a little bit better. I think that Alex Leatherwood came in with fresh legs. He was able to move around with some of the pass rushers he was facing. I was incredibly impressed with the way that offensive line performed down the stretch. It's been an offensive line that's been up and down. And then all of a sudden they turned into a group that really could protect Tua and give him 3, 4, and 5 seconds to be able to throw the ball. So, there's definitely questions about what you have defensively. Was Georgia tired? I'm not sure, but I just think Tua needs to get a lot of the credit for backing some of the defenders off and kind of baffling. They weren't even sure what to expect game plan-wise on Georgia's defense in the front seven. I'm sure they were prepared, but they definitely had to move some pieces around.
I love our buddy Cliff Nelson, who's an LSU fan in the comment section. He says, Tua's going to get exposed when he faces LSU, defensive back University.
I respect it.
Which is essentially him taking Jalen Hurts' name out of those. He's making the same comment about Jalen Hurts and replacing Tua in there. I love that from you guys.
Cliff Nelson never makes any there's no middle ground with Cliff. Cliff he's going to tell you how he feels about LSU.
It's why we love this time of year, for sure. Scott Anthony Collins says, leave Jalen Hurts alone, please. Listen, it's not me that said this. It's Greg McElroy, a former Alabama quarterback, that not only suggested he could transfer, but gave a destination where he might go.
Yeah, listen, the topic's going to come up. I think it's funny to say, the media spreading this, media spreading this. It was a topic. The reason the media is talking about it because everybody knows this is what happens with college quarterbacks. This is the reason that Jared Stidham's at Auburn. This is the reason Jacob Eason might be headed to Washington. This is the reason a guy like Malik Zaire was headed to Florida last year. This is what happens in the offseason. Just because Jalen hasn't said anything about it doesn't mean it hasn't crossed his mind.
Yeah, all right. We'll talk more about Alabama here over the course of our program here on SEC Country Live. For now, item number 2 on our list. Speaking of, by the way, Tua Tagovailoa, we played a little bit of the Lane Kiffin audio yesterday, talking about Jalen Hurts, talking about Tua and the fact that Tua might transfer. But Kiffin also said something that I think is going to get Georgia fans stirred up a bit. We talked about this morning on Dog Nation Daily. Kiffin let it be known that, hey, when it comes to recruiting trail, even though Fromm was a one-time Alabama commit, he says, well, we weren't that hot on Fromm. We like Tua Tagovailoa better anyway. Here is what Kiffin said about Fromm and Tua, and is this an unnecessary jab sort of taken in the direction of Jake Fromm? Here, take a listen to Lane Kiffin from the Dan Patrick Show yesterday.
Obviously, that was never released publicly. Now that I'm not there, I can tell you that story. Now, we thought Fromm was great, went and watched him practice. This guy was an unbelievable leader, great baseball player, great command of the team in practice. Knew this guy was going to be really, really special. But just when you just watch Tua's talent, this was off the charts unique. Fromm is a great leader. Fromm is very talented, but Jake Fromm's not a first-round draft pick. That's not, you don't watch him and say, okay, that guy's going to be a first-round draft pick. You watch him, that guy's a great college quarterback. If he has the right surrounding cast also, which he does have, phenomenal cast around him, Tua's got a higher ceiling.
So, I like Lane Kiffin's candid commentary. I think Lane Kiffin's a really good play caller. I think this is this is a bad move on Lane's part. This idea of, well, he decommitted from us, so we didn't want him anyway. I mean, that's such a bad look. And this notion that somehow that it's already proven that Tua is going to be a better quarterback than Jake Fromm, who himself has had a full year of pretty strong play from Georgia. I think the analysis on Kiffin's part may just be wrong on this. I like Tua a lot, that I do. But speaking as a guy who's got red and black on right now, I'm not trading you Fromm for Tua. I think from a Georgia standpoint, you got the right quarterback in Athens.
Well, they possibly do. I think, listen, I know this gets pointed out, and I heard this a lot today about, this is a bad look on Alabama's part. That has nothing to do with Alabama. This has nothing to do with Alabama fans. This has to do with Lane Kiffin. This happens all the time, where maybe you have one guy that you covet a little bit more. I thought this was almost in response to Jake Fromm's dad's comments last week about how weird the recruiting situation was under Nick Saban and how he didn't even really communicate with Lane Kiffin at practice. It was all Nick Saban. I thought at the time when I heard it, I was like, you know what? Maybe Nick was like, hey, Lane's on his way out the door. We don't need Lane on any recruiting with Jake Fromm. But looking back at the situation, maybe Lane did covet Tua a little bit more. I'm not ready to go out and say that Jake Fromm's not going to be a first-round draft pick. I think he has all the ability to get there. I think he'll grow over his Georgia career. But if the question sitting on the screen right now is brighter future Fromm or Tua, I have to go in 2018 at least with Tua. I don't know in the end game, but I'm telling you right now, with the talent he's going to have surrounding himself, the fact that they are losing a couple of running backs, a couple of offensive linemen, maybe the defense takes a hit next year at Georgia. I don't think that Georgia's going to be a bad team at all. But I think that Tua's set up to succeed in 2018 if he is a starter.
So I don't have a strong argument against Tua. There's a chance he's a really good quarterback. I mean, gosh, how could you not be impressed? The one thing that I said about Tua in the national championship game was I knew that he was a dual threat type quarterback, that he had some ability with his legs. What I did not know about him was that he had the durability to sort of shake hits off. That's what really impressed me, because I actually saw him out of pads after the game was over. I'm like, he's not that big.
Yeah, but escapability, I think.
Yeah. He's escapability. He sort of like shakes free of would-be tacklers. So there's a lot to like about Tua Tagovailoa. I just think that we got to be careful thinking that we have now seen the future because we saw 15 minutes of a guy play football on Monday night.
No, I think that's fair enough. I think with the situations you have coming back, I think Alabama's offensive line's a little bit better next year. I think that you move some pieces around. I think that Jonah Williams might move back to right tackle. They get probably all their running backs back next year except Bo Scarborough. I just think that Tua is put in a little bit better position. I think that Georgia's going to have to replace a little bit of leadership. I think they're very close. I think that Georgia has a great chance to get back to this spot next year. I just think given the situation in Alabama for either quarterback, I think Tua's set up a little bit better next year.
Robin Posgay says if it wasn't released publicly, it's just gossip. I mean, it's not gossip from Kiffin's standpoint because I mean, I guess he's sort of on the inside there. But I think this is sort of a bad look. I mean, even if
look for Lane Kiffin.
Even if he's telling the truth, it's sort of a face-saving moment of, well, this guy, made me look bad by publicly decommitting from the program, whatever, Mr. Fromm may have said. So therefore, I'm going to get retribution in a national radio interview. This is one of the things that makes Lane Kiffin look small. I like him as a personality. I think he's a terrific play caller. But one of the reasons why Lane Kiffin's not a big-time head coach right now is because he uses moments like this for retribution, maybe against
See, I don't see it as retribution. I think it as just Lane Kiffin being Lane Kiffin and not really thinking about what he's saying. I think that he has his own way of viewing things, and in his own mind, maybe that's how he saw things. Maybe it's, hey, you know what? I just thought Tua had a little more arm talent. It's, I don't know that Jake Fromm's a first-round pick. I just think that you never go out and say it. I don't think there was any retribution getting back at Jake Fromm for flipping to Georgia. I'm sure he wanted to go to Georgia. He's from Georgia and loves to be at Georgia. It turned out great for him. Turned out pretty good for Tua as well. I just think that Lane needs to keep his mouth shut.
So, and one more thing, and I'm not trying to pick a fight, I promise you, but what Kiffin says here does sound eerily reminiscent of sources close to Alabama say, well, Alabama didn't really want Nadab Joseph going back to December.
Right.
Sources close to Alabama say after the tight end chose Tennessee over Alabama, the junior college kid, well, he may have been too immature to come here anyway. There's always sources saying stuff about Alabama kids when they don't end up, or Alabama recruits when they don't end up going to Alabama. This sort of feels like the kind of thing that sources seem to say a lot of.
I understand that might sound like sour grapes, but to me, Lane Kiffin's not Alabama. I mean, he doesn't have it. Listen, Alabama fans don't want anything to do with Lane Kiffin right now. So, let's try to cut the cord on that. And that's not sources come from Alabama. That's Lane Kiffin on a national radio show talking about, the recruiting tactics he was looking at last year. The Nadab Joseph thing, I don't really know what to think about that. Let's wait. If he comes to Georgia and makes it into the Georgia, you have to have better grades probably than you get in Alabama. If he gets to Georgia and he's a great player, then we can look back and probably say sour grapes on that point. But who knows at this point? I just don't want Lane Kiffin's name being associated with anything anybody thinks about Alabama with what he said.
Kevin Blackman says, what's Alabama going to say when Quay Walker doesn't go there? We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. We'll leave this a different subject for a different day. For now, let's move on to item number 3 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I thought this was kind of interesting from Gus Malzahn. I guess it's some sort of coaches convention. The truth is, I don't really 100% know where this came from. It wasn't like a TV or radio interview. He was speaking at some sort of convention. I'm going to show you a tweet from somebody who was there. Zach Barnett gets the quote from Malzahn. He says, the SEC network was supposed to be really cool when it started 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's all about trying to get a coach fired. Now, we don't know exactly what he's saying. Is this a criticism of Feinbaum, who sort of covers a lot of hours on that show? They also have other programming as well. But when you've watched the SEC network, do you see anything on there that you think is unfair to SEC coaches?
Well, I think that what you have is a 24-hour news cycle on SEC network. So they're always talking about whatever the hot topic is. And for whatever reason this year, Gus Malzahn coaching in certain situations did not give himself a good look. He didn't look good against Clemson, didn't look good in the second half against LSU, looked great at Georgia and Alabama where I thought the talent really showed. I mean, they have an incredible amount of talent in that program. You allowed it to shine when you're at Jordan Hare, and then you throw up another stink bomb when you get to the SEC championship game, and then when you go back to play UCF. I think that Gus Malzahn, listen, if I was in Gus's shoous, I'd probably look at it the same way. I'd say, man, you guys are extremely critical. There's been a record number of coaches fired in the SEC. But, at the top of it, Gus Malzahn's getting a raise. And the reason you're getting a raise is because a lot of people are paying attention to Auburn football. So I'd be careful with, who you're casting shade on.
Here's the other thing, too. As somebody who I guess, kind of works in this industry, the one thing that you notice, ESPN's made a lot of cutbacks lately, dropping millions of dollars in salary, reducing the overall programming it's doing. But have you noticed that there haven't really been any change in the SEC network? They're still doing SEC Now, still doing the Feinbaum Show, still doing, they've even added some program this season. I mean, the only thing I can say is right now they're showing a commitment to the SEC network. So, if Malzahn's unhappy with the coverage that he's getting there, there's no guarantee the SEC network lasts forever. I would say they're doing what they have to do to survive, which is telling the truth. And the truth is, Malzahn, if he was sort of called into a question, if he was sort of debated on that network, that reflects reality. Malzahn could have lost his job. Now, he won the Iron Bowl and saved it, but he could have lost his job. The SEC network's just trying to exist. It's trying to have a right to exist, and the only way it sort of has that right is by telling the truth. And I can't really find any fault with any of the coverage that I've seen there on that network.
I just think that it gets hammered home more because it is, like I said, a 24-hour news cycle. You're going to see all these things start to come up, and everybody on there, Booger McFarland and Marcus, they're going to have their, hey, this coach is on my hot seat. Hey, this coach is on my hot seat. And those statements they make are going to get traction as well. I just think that Gus Malzahn needs to be careful. If you're making that much money, then you need to be aware that you are in a public forum and that your job does not last that long if you don't perform. And in my opinion, the ups were really good for Auburn this year, but I don't know if they got to the ceiling they should have this year with the talent they had on the field.
And the truth is, coming from the perspective of someone who sort of talks for a living, I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm not going to put my job at risk by saying only safe, boring things just to help Gus Malzahn save his job. I'm not going to trade my career for yours.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, listen, that's the thing about coaching. And everybody in the NFL knows this. NFL stands for not for long. And it's the same way when it comes to college coaching. You get in, you make your money, you have your worth, and you go out. Nobody's going to just pat you on the back for winning 10 games and losing 4. That's just not the way things happen in the SEC these days. And if you are not comfortable with it, then I'm telling you right now, you need to find a different profession. That's just the nature of the beast for Gus Malzahn right now. He has a lot of people to prove wrong next year.
Eddie Ellsbury says Gus is right. The SEC network is creating news instead of covering it. I respect Eddie's opinion. I'm not sure I agree with that, though, because I don't think that Paul Feinbaum or Peter Burns or any of those guys in that network, they can't get Gus Malzahn fired. I mean, it's not like even like a respected analyst like Booger McFarland. If he says Malzahn's terrible, he ought to be fired. That kind of opinion's not carrying enough weight to get Malzahn fired. No. What those opinions are, and I'm going to tell you from a guy who reads this comment section all day long, what you see on shows like the one we're doing now, like the ones that exist in the SEC network, are more of a reflection of what other people already think, more so than us driving the bus on what people should think. Let me tell you something. If I thought I could change y'all's opinion by telling you what to think, that's all I'd try to do all day long. But you just really can't do that.
We can't even change each other's opinion on certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that, listen, I think this is Gus Malzahn paying attention to something he shouldn't. And I think that Gus Malzahn has to be careful because I've mentioned it, and I said it yesterday on the show. Gus Malzahn, in my opinion, he came up a rung on the ladder, the way I view him as a coach. I thought there was a lot of questions about his ability to beat Georgia and Alabama on a consistent basis. But you still have a 4-loss team, and you have to turn around and start to think about yourself. Dari Noka and Peter Burns, those guys didn't go out there and blow that game against UCF. That was your coaching job, and it was your job to get those guys ready to play. So it's tough, and obviously these comments coming after he's all over ESPN, and he loves it when it's a part of recruiting and good things are going on, but now it's a bad thing all of a sudden when they're talking about who's on the hot seat. I just don't get it.
All right, we'll talk more about that in the comment section throughout the day here on SEC Country Live. For now, let me move on to item number 4 in our SEC Country Live First and 10. So LSU has added a quarterback into its quarterback competition here this upcoming season. We already know that a couple of the rising sophomores, or I guess redshirt freshman and rising sophomore, Miles Brennan, Lowell Narcisse, they're going to battle it out here for the potential starting job. But another name kind of thrown in that mix as Andre Sale has decided to transfer from Tennessee Tech over to the LSU program. Here's what Sale kind of put out as his way of saying this. Just want to take time to thank everyone who helped make my 2 years at Tennessee Tech special for me. Grew as a man, student, and a football player. Goes on to announce that he's coming to LSU. This was a top 100 quarterback in the country a couple years ago, according to 24/7 Sports. Had offers from schools like obviously Tennessee Tech, Austin Peay. Not a major college offer really in the mix there. Not great stats for him there at Tennessee Tech, which is the... I should remember this. I've been to Tennessee Tech before. I went to a basketball camp there. Somebody help us out with what Tennessee Tech's nickname is. Somebody in the comment section will tell us. It's in Cookeville, Tennessee. I do know that because I've been there before. But, not great stats for him there. This is more of just the Eagles?
Wow.
Golden Eagles? Okay, I didn't remember that. Anyway, not great numbers at Tennessee Tech, but he's in there in the mix. And I guess when it comes to quarterbacks, it's just about having as many bodies as you can. Right?
He's a practice body. I mean, and what's kind of funny about it is you go from a place like Tennessee Tech and you go to LSU, you actually still have to sit out of here. It don't matter if you're coming from a D1, AA program or anything like that. He's a practice body. I mean, his numbers last year are like 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Nothing crazy that kind of stands out to you about him, but I think it's important for the bodies to be there, and when you look at this LSU offense, trying to figure out what they are. I mean, all the reports out there are Steve Ensminger's the guy to take over, and he was a good in that role as the interim offensive coordinator a couple years ago. 32, I think, points per game, like 460 yards per game. He did well, but I think you have to figure out who the quarterback is, and obviously this guy's not your answer. So you have to get in there, figure out what kind of offense you're going to run, and figure out what LSU really is going to be as a program this next year.
Bo Molinari, by the way, in the comment section said we're going to talk about Mike Elko, the hire at Texas A&M. We really haven't done that yet. We are going to talk some A&M a little later on our show today here on SEC Country Live. But on the subject of LSU here for a moment. So when you think about adding a quarterback in, and you think about what LSU is going to try to be in 2018, and we kind of talked yesterday about the chances that LSU is going to be in the preseason top 25. This is the top 25 team here in 2018. Well, Alex Hickey from SEC Country made the case yesterday for why LSU might not be. LSU fans, though, find it good news that some of the national writers are putting LSU in the top 25. But maybe for reasons that are a little hard for some LSU fans to understand, I noticed that Dennis Dodd had LSU solidly in his way to early top 25. But when you read about this, you almost wonder, wait, are there no editors at CBS Sports?
What's this guy doing?
Here's Dennis Dodd. Now, I'm going to read straight from what it said. It may have been changed now, but this morning, this is the quote that I pulled from him at CBS Sports. He says, with the world's first college $0.5 million offensive coordinator. He means $2.5 million defensive coordinator. But surely that's just a typo, right?
Yeah,
Dodd goes on to write, the familiar pressure returns to Baton Rouge. Coach O did a nice job of rescuing the season after the Troy loss. Gets Alabama and Georgia at home. But let's get serious. For that money, Dave Aranda better develop a Heisman quarterback and score 45 a game. You almost wonder, does he know that Dave Aranda's the defensive coordinator?
What is this guy talking about? And this Dennis Dodd, he has like probably a Heisman vote. I mean, this is
He's part of the blue check brigade.
I think this has to be.
This is a very serious man.
I think that this has to be such a slap in the face if you're an LSU fan right now. That you're ranking, you're gambling where you're ranking on us up and down the top 25 based on Dave Aranda as an offensive coordinator.
Right. Listen,
it's so laughable.
And I don't think I'm beyond reproach here. I make plenty of mistakes here. Hopefully, I wouldn't leave one unchecked for a couple of days here. So is it good news or bad news that one of the national media's most serious college football writers thinks LSU's a top 25 team, but for a reason that doesn't necessarily match with the reality?
Maybe it's the perception that LSU gets on a national scale, and it's deserved because of some of the success they have had in the last 10, 15, 20 years. But it's just such a head scratcher for me because yesterday we're on here talking about Alex Hickey, and he's saying, you know what, there's just too many questions, especially offensively, for me to think that LSU's a top 25 team right now. Alex Hickey hit it on the head. I mean, he hit that right on the nose, and here you have a guy like Dennis Dodd, a national sports writer for CBS, that's going, oh, well, Dave Aranda, better develop a Heisman quarterback. I thought it was so mind-boggling. I thought for sure it was a typo, and then I kept going. I was like, what is he talking about?
What my question would be is, to get more on like the serious subject for LSU, can a team be in the top 25 on defense alone? Because, you start to wonder, Darius Guice, Brennan or Narcisse. I don't know that I feel really good about either one of those guys right now. I'm assuming it's going to be Brennan, although I guess Narcisse is going to have a really good chance to win that job. I don't know really the first thing about Ensminger. I certainly think he's probably a downgrade from what Matt Canada was the year before. So it's like almost like a worse offense than the end of the Les Miles era, with a defense that with Aranda and some of the talent they have coming in and transferring over and things like that, it may be a really good defense. Is that going to be enough to be scary for Auburn, enough to be scary for Alabama? Is that going to be enough here? Because that may be all the profile of this team is. Good on defense and no offense whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's funny. And Cliff Nelson chimes in and says, absolutely, because Bama's been doing it for years. And it's partly true that they have been based in the top 25 and the top 10 and top 5, a lot based on what their defense has been doing the last couple of years. Offense has been good, don't get me wrong. I mean, they've scored enough points to win games. But based on just your defense, if you do have a guy like Dave Aranda as a defensive coordinator, and you do have a bunch of those position players, yes, that team can carry you. It can scare a team like Alabama. You've seen it the last couple of years. It can scare a team like Auburn. You've seen it, LSU beating a team like Auburn without a great offense. I think that Steve Ensminger is a step down. He's been throughout the SEC. He's like the offensive version of John Chavis almost. The guy's been he's been around the block. But when I see the problems they're going to have on this team, when I see some of the losses they've had in terms of, like Arden Key and Kevin Tolliver and Dante Jackson, all these guys heading to the NFL, I think it's tough for me to think that LSU just steps right back in and becomes a top 5 defense. I think they have to do some developing. Dave Aranda will be able to do that, but their offense has to score points too. At some point in time, their offense has to come around.
Ty Pham in the comment section, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ty, says this is also kind of what LSU did in 2011. The truth is that those LSU teams may not have been scoring a lot of points, but they still had elite wide receivers. They still had elite talent. I don't know that you see one of those guys in this year's team unless as the 5-star receiver that committed right before the end of the early signing period, signed before the early signing period was over. Is it Terrace Marshall?
Terrace Marshall, yeah.
Terrace Marshall, the 5-star young man. You insert him, get him ready to play. This is not one of those talented LSU offenses. There have been a lot of underperforming LSU offenses that still had a lot of talent. I'm not even sure that this group's necessarily got a lot of real shiny talent.
Well, I think you don't know what you have in Miles Brennan. I think given an entire offseason with an offensive coordinator, Miles Brennan might turn out to be a pretty good player. I think what you do have at LSU is a very strong offensive line. We mentioned the offensive line was kind of an Achilles heel last year with all the late transfers. All of a sudden, a lot of those guys that got that playing time that as true freshmen are coming back and will be a part of a strong group. So what do you have at the wide receiver position? You have DJ Chark. You have some other guys that can make plays. I just think that when you look at the defensive side of the ball, there is some rebuilding. You have to find a balance. You know, you can't just be kind of mediocre in both. One of them has to be great if you're going to stick in the top 10, top 25.
A couple LSU comments. Cliff Nelson says the offensive line is stacked. LSU's going to be fine. Shannon Burgess says, I know it's the NFL, but the Ravens won a Super Bowl strictly with defense right there around the turn of the century, around year 2000. That is obviously true as well. Let's move on to item number 5 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Breaking yesterday, at least the report here, we don't know what the finality is. Seattle Times saying that Jacob Eason, the Georgia quarterback and the starter at the beginning of the season, taking a long look at Washington. Adam Jude, the reporter here, saying, barring a last-minute change of heart, former Lake Stevens High School quarterback, that's in the state of Washington, by the way, Jacob Eason is expected to transfer from Georgia to Washington for the next step in his college football career, multiple sources told the Seattle Times. Now, there's a bit of wiggle room kind of baked in that comment with barring a last-minute change of mind. That's not a full-on report. That's just a suggestion. But does Eason to Washington make sense to you? Do you think this is the likely outcome?
I think it is. Obviously, there's a ton of programs in and around. And I think the reason that the last-minute change of heart could come, if it comes, is because Washington is already loaded with their quarterback class this year. And their quarterback is also returned. He's a Pac-12 Player of the Year, and he's coming back for another year. So does Jacob Eason try to thread the needle? Does he try to get that 1 year at Washington that might extend his career and give him a shot at making it to the NFL? Maybe. I think there's a ton of teams that would covet him, and I think that right now you're going into a good situation. I just think it stinks, and for both these guys, Jalen Hurts and Jacob Eason as well, that you're sitting out a year next year, and then you have one more shot at this at a program you've never played for. I guess if Washington's the team, with Chris Peterson as the head coach there, then it makes a lot of sense for me.
Somebody in the comments section mentioned this earlier. It really is true how similar the Alabama and the Georgia situations are. Yeah. It's amazing that there were people suspecting, me about Tua, plenty of people about Jake Fromm, that they were better than the incumbent starters before they ever played. Come to find out they do play, and they probably both really were. Fromm, just kind of, for Georgia anyway, better than Jacob Eason. Tua, at least based on what we saw in the national championship game, better for Alabama than Jalen Hurts might be. And in this case, the sort of common opinion was just sort of right. And now, in the case of Eason, almost definitely, and Hurts maybe, now they're looking for new homes after having a lot of hype around them in 2016. Really amazing how those two stories have kind of paralleled each other.
And hot take alert, it's going to continue for Georgia. Justin Fields is going to step into that program, and you're going to run that pro style of offense. I don't know that the running back stable is quite as good next year, with some of the youth they're going to have. And if they do stumble running a pro-style offense, at some point you wonder if Justin Fields, if there's not people looking at the program wondering when and if Justin Fields takes the field. Is Jake Fromm going to start the next 3 years and Justin Fields is going to ride the pine? I don't know. I think that's going to be an interesting topic to watch moving forward, too, where it's kind of been between both these programs this year. I think it's going to continue next year.
And my take on that is, and here's where the Alabama comparison also kind of works for Georgia as well. When Alabama brought in Tua Tagovailoa, I don't think they had a plan for how it was going to work out. I just think they knew it was better to have him than not.
Yeah. And well, we just knew what it wasn't working in the first half. So, something's got to change.
No, I mean when they brought him into campus.
Yeah.
When they brought him on campus, it's like, well, do you need a Tua? You've got a Jalen Hurts. I don't know, but it's sort of better to have more good quarterbacks than not enough. The same thing's true for Georgia with Justin Fields and Jake Fromm. I don't think Kirby Smart knows how that's going to play out. This is a situation that cannot be controlled. Sometimes we have a tendency to want to control things, control narratives, control outcomes. This is an outcome that can't be controlled, and the story hasn't been written yet. Maybe Fromm gets hurt. Maybe Fields never plays. Maybe they compete in practice, and just like Fromm beat out Eason, maybe Fields beats out Fromm. All of these outcomes are sort of out there, and they really cannot be controlled. And to think that Nick Saban or Kirby Smart knew how it was going to play out when they had two elite quarterbacks on campus at the same time, I don't think they do. They just know that stockpiling talent's the way that you win.
You just want an option. You just want an option when and if something happens. And look no further than Georgia this year as an example of something like that, where a guy like Jacob Eason gets dinged up and a Jake Fromm can take over that position and take them all the way to a national championship game. So I think you're right. I don't know how you control those situations, and I feel bad for the guys like Jacob Eason and possibly Jalen Hurts if he transfers as well, that it just didn't turn out for them. All of a sudden, they spent 2 good years at these programs, and they got one more year as a shot. I guess I'm not taking a shot at Alabama or the fans or Georgia the fans. I'm taking a shot at the NCAA. It stinks that these guys can't go somewhere and play next year.
Well, I think you're probably right about that. And even from the perspective of a Georgia fan, I'd love to see Eason go somewhere, find a home, and play. And by the way, really quick, because I know we've been on this subject for kind of a long time, but it's not a no-brainer that Eason would transfer. Because the truth is the NFL scouts are going to like Eason whether he ever plays or not.
Right.
I mean, he's going to get drafted if he never played another down at Georgia, because NFL scouts just like tall guys with big arms. So by Eason transferring to another school, he's actually delayed his entrance in the NFL draft by at least a year, because the assumption is that he's going to, after spending a transfer year sitting on the bench, he's going to want to play at that point in time. So by making a decision to transfer, he's actually delaying his entry in the NFL by at least a season. What are you laughing at, by the way?
I'm laughing. Cliff Nelson's on here. He's betting gallons of Crown again that LSU is going to win certain games.
I love that, man.
It's like,
y'all don't bet a gallon of Crown Royal with Cliff Nelson for sure.
It's funny, man.
By the way, Logan Westerman, speaking of we mentioned Jalen Hurts, he says in the comment section, Jalen will be great at Florida under Dan Mullen. Mullen can develop and build an offense around him. He'd be great at Tennessee because maybe it's Texas, he says, because he'd murdered defenses in the Big 12. So that's Logan Westerman's thought there about schools that might be a better fit for Jalen Hurts.
I tend to agree with you. I think that the problem for Jalen Hurts is now you have to sit out a year. Now where is Emory Jones at? Is he a better quarterback next year? Are you going to have to vie with him for playing time? It's the same kind of thing that Malik Zaire went through this year when he transferred to Florida. So I don't know what the landing spot would be. I think we obviously still have to wait and see if Jalen actually is going to transfer, but there are a couple of good locations for him. I wouldn't rule out Florida Atlantic either.
Of course, Emory Jones sitting the bench, something he's gotten comfortable with the U.S. Army All-American game. I know he was not too happy about it some of his time spent on the bench for that. He's a little upset about that.
A little shot there, yeah. It's tough deal.
Item number 6 on our SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. By the way, you want to talk about a busy day in the SEC, the fact that we're just now getting to this at item number 6. So Bruce Arians, the former Cardinals coach, goes on the Colin Cowherd show and just sort of pulls a rumor. I'm not saying he pulled it out of thin air, but the thing sort of dropped out of the sky here. The notion that Nick Saban covets the New York Giants job. Here is Arians, a guy that certainly knows NFL circles very well, having been an NFL coach himself. But listen to what he says here to Colin Cowherd about Nick Saban's future and a desire to return to the NFL. Take a listen here.
It would not surprise me. And there's a job he covets. It just happens to be open. But he's got a dynasty right now, another dynamite recruiting class. Why he would do it, I don't know, but it would not shock me if he did.
What job?
The Giants.
Why the New York Giants?
Because they're the New York Giants. And, when we grew up, they were the thing.
Notre Dame football.
Yes.
So he covets the New York Giants job because when they were growing up, it was Notre Dame football. What era was this exactly? Because they went over the Super Bowl in 1986.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
definitely weren't the Steel Curtain or by any means.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about like the 1950s, like the pre-Super Bowl era? I mean, how old is Saban? I mean, I'm probably not doing the math on that correct, but are you buying this from Bruce Arians that Nick Saban, quote, covets the New York Giants job, and that's a job he'd leave Alabama for?
No, I don't buy it at all. I don't buy it.
By the way, Michael, our producer, you can't see, but he's just to my right over here.
Yeah.
He's a big Giants fan. He's shaking his head. He loved the idea of Saban.
But
in New York.
I think there's a chance that at some point in the next couple of years, Saban gets restless, says, you know what, I'm getting old. He's 66 right now. Maybe I want to take one more shot at the NFL. I think there's a chance that happens. I think it's 15-20% chance that happens. I don't know that he retires at Alabama. I'm just saying that I think that looking in the future, all I know is that the Giants is not the place. And do you know how bad Nick Saban hates media? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine Nick Saban having to address New York media on a day in and day out basis in a place like that? There's just no way you can sell me that the New York Giants is the job that Nick Saban covets in the NFL.
Well, speaking of the New York media, Tom Rock from Newsday, we'll show you the quote from him based on his reporting here. What Tom Rock is saying is, a source told Newsday that Saban's not going to be the Giants' next coach. No way, the source said. And here's what I almost think for sure the New York media would try to do with Saban. This is the kind of thing that's happened before. They'd love nothing more than building him up, and they'd love nothing more than to be there for the tear down.
Oh, no
because
doubt.
The one thing you and I both are on the same page about, there is so much sort of bitterness and I think it's almost jealousy about the Northeast about college football. They can't stand there are people like us that think that college football is superior as a product of the NFL.
Yeah.
And so they'd love nothing more than taking like the college football giant, putting him in a pro football situation, and then ripping him apart if he's not successful there.
I agree.
They try to do the same thing to Steve Spurrier in Washington. These big city media types love doing that kind of thing where they take the college icon and they tear him apart because of the maybe a lack of success in the NFL. But the truth is, and you may not agree with me on this, if you're a true competitor, college football is the place you want to be. The NFL has almost like this socialistic type rule in place where you can't pick a player until 31 other teams have also picked a player.
Yeah.
But in college football, you can get 25 first-round picks.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what essentially Nick Saban does. His signing class every year about 25 first-round picks. If you're the insatiable competitor, the college talent acquisition process serves you better than the NFL's does.
Yeah, I think Nick Saban's actually gone on record and talked about that. He says, it's just a lot harder, almost impossible to really create an edge for yourself in some of these NFL situations. If you're not in charge of personnel, if you're not in charge of play calling, if you're not in charge of everything, it's tough to create an edge. A lot easier to create an edge, and it's also easier for him to have an impact on guys' lives. In the NFL, Nick Saban likes, I know he gets a bad rep in the media, he likes impacting the lives of some of his players. I mean, he thinks he does that in a good way. He's allowed a ton of people to achieve their dream and play in the NFL. Nobody in the NFL cares. They could care less about what Nick Saban thinks in the NFL. Those players are just there to make their money and collect their check. And I was one of those guys, and you go home and you don't really care about what the head coach has to say about you. It's just not that way in college. And I think that Nick Saban likes college a lot more for that reason.
Bo Molinari says that Saban's days in Miami are already there to pick apart, meaning the media won't have to pick apart his time with the Giants. They can already dissect his maybe lack of success with the Dolphins. But the truth is, and I think you'll agree with me on this, when he took that job, my understanding is that doctors gave him some medical advice about Drew Brees, and they couldn't acquire Drew Brees. They chose Dante Culpepper instead, who was coming off a 40-touchdown season with the Minnesota Vikings. If Saban chooses or is allowed to take Brees over Culpepper, all of a sudden that changes the history of football forever, and the success that Brees had in New Orleans, maybe he's having that success with Nick Saban in Miami, and he was 8-8 without him. Maybe he's 11-5, 12-4 with him.
I've had this conversation with Nick Saban. I was visiting with Nick Saban. I went back. He was asking me about my injuries, about my feet, about my ankle, and I was talking to him about dealing with doctors, dealing with different doctor types, getting MRIs, trying to make sure I was okay and cleared to come back. And he said, you know what? That's one of the reasons I left the NFL is because I could not get them to understand that we needed Drew Brees in order to be successful. Couldn't tell any of the doctors that Drew Brees was going to be fine. They didn't want to hear it. Dante Culpepper, his shoulder basically it explodes the next year. I mean, the guy ended up with a ton of shoulder injuries. Nick Saban couldn't affect it in the way he wanted to, and he told me about that. He was just like, listen, I could not have enough control over some of the things that were going on.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting. Boy, talk about a first-person perspective from Mike there. That's really good stuff. Item number 7, AT&T SEC Country Live, our first and 10 list. John Chavis, speaking of defensive coordinators, we're going to talk about some of these hires that have been compiled here over the course of the last couple of weeks. John Chavis to Arkansas. I think Chavis is probably a pretty good move for the Hogs. It seems like some Razorback fans may not be totally on board with this. I thought Trent Shaded had kind of an interesting take on this, looking at some of the statistical work from Chavis's recent defenses. Let me show you this quote here from Shaded at SECCountry.com on that very subject about how if you look at the work there at Texas A&M, not great, but a big improvement from the year before he got there. Not great, maybe at LSU in year one, but I should say big improvement at LSU in year one, gets even better in the future. Here's the quote from Shaded, who says, when Chavis arrived in College Station for the 2015 season, Aggies were coming off consecutive seasons, finished last in the SEC in total defense. Hard to believe. They finished 8th, 10th, and 9th in 3 seasons under Chavis. That isn't dominant, but it's a notable improvement. Shaded also says, same is true for Chavis at LSU from 2009 to 2014. Tigers were 9th in the conference in total defense. The year prior to his arrival, they improved to 6th in year one, never finished worse than 3rd in his final 5 seasons there. So I look at that and, to the extent you want to care about the old school total defense stuff, I'm not big in those old school numbers, but I guess it is a data point of some kind that Chavis is a year one improver. I could see that happening in Arkansas.
Well, I think it's a big uphill battle. Obviously, he's going to have struggles in year one. I mean, you look at the defense at Arkansas right now. They need help along the defensive line. They need help in the secondary in a big way, specifically at safety. He's going to have to find guys that fit his defense. My question about John Chavis has always been, is he a good coach when he has good players? I think there's a difference sometimes in good coaches that can do it with anybody and good coaches that can just find people to fit their system. I think that the talent he had at Texas A&M in a lot of different ways should have been better. When you look at the draft picks he had on the defensive side of the ball, especially the last couple of years of Myles Garrett and some of the other players they had back there in the secondary, they should have been better in my opinion. But I think this is a step in the right direction for Arkansas. With all that being said, I think that this is a guy that Chad Morris needs. I mentioned this last week on the show that you need somebody like John Chavis. It almost reminds me of some of the things going on with Wade Phillips right now with the Rams. You got the young coach and somebody that's an up-and-comer with the old head at the defense coordinator position that knows their way around the league. John Chavis said in his opener, listen, I love the SEC. I want to be in the SEC. He understands how things work. I think he can be a great sounding board. I don't know how well they perform next year on defense, but I think he's a good hire for Arkansas.
Bo Molinari says it's a bad move for the Razorbacks. Chavis fallen off since his glory days at LSU. Did you see that Belk Bowl defense? They gave it like 50 to Wake Forest. It's crazy. He says that Mike Elko at College Station is going to be a better DC than Chavis at Arkansas. I don't disagree with that necessarily. I think that Chavis is a pretty good hire for Arkansas. But when when Texas A&M makes the bold move of going to Notre Dame and taking its defensive coordinator big bucks after kind of getting spurned by Dave Aranda, I mean, Bo, I'm a 100% agree with you. I think that A&M made a really strong defensive coordinator hire.
I had to give credit to Texas A&M too. I mean, they have put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what? We're tired of the situation we have going on. 8 wins per year under Kevin Sumlin is not enough for us, and we're going to open the pocketbook. And we mentioned the financial gains, obviously, that you get at a place like Texas A&M. They opened it up for Jimbo Fisher. They tried to open it up for Dave Aranda, and now they did open it up for Mike Elko. They are loading up in terms of the staff over there.
I think it takes more than a year to see it come to fruition. You've seen a lot of these first-year coaches take a while to kind of get everything underneath them. But by year 2, you could see some big-time performance there at Texas A&M. As far as why it didn't work out for John Chavis at Texas A&M, a defensive coordinator trying to pair himself with a high-powered, up-tempo offense. Same thing could be true at Arkansas under Chad Morris. Reese Davis, the ESPN personality, was actually on Bo Mattingly's show. Bo does a really good radio show out there in the state of Arkansas. Davis was on with Bo Mattingly, and Reese Davis kind of suggested that, hey, maybe that pairing of up-tempo offense with kind of old-school defensive coordinator, is that going to work out? Here is Reese Davis with Bo Mattingly.
I think it is fair to say that the productivity of his recent teams hasn't always matched the talent, but he certainly has a lengthy track record and is highly respected within the sport. Look, if you can get a guy like that and give him an opportunity to match a defense that will complement your offense and vice versa, if John has a system that is going to need an offense that takes time off the clock, then it might not be a good fit. But if they have worked that out, and certainly a guy with John's reputation and resume, I think would be a good hire.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I go back and look at what Chavis did at LSU. I thought it was pretty impressive. I mean, individual games, too. I thought he shut down Johnny Manziel. I thought he shut down Gus Malzahn. I thought he had some really big-time performances back in an era like 2014, 2015, when everybody scored 1 million points, 2013, 2012. I mean, he was having some pretty big-time performances. But what Reese Davis brings up there is fair to wonder. If you had the defensive coordinator that had a hard time in the Kevin Sumlin offense pairing, it could be the same situation with Chad Morris, and by the way, with a lot less talent in Fayetteville.
Yeah, it's going to be true, and I think it's going to take a year or two if you want to get that Arkansas defense back to where it needs to be. And I mentioned that they have a lot of holes on that defense. He even says it in his opening statements, which, by the way, as a former player, kind of makes me cringe. If you're going to step up as a new defensive coordinator and you're about to take over and your players are listening to that presser and he says, man, we have a lot of holes on this defense. We've got to do some recruiting. We've got to fill in here. It's going to be patchwork for a year or two, but we're going to finally get there. Bad look for me. I was not a fan of him coming out and saying that, but he's speaking the truth. From a guy that's sitting in these chairs, you talk about John Chavis. They need help on the defensive line. They need help in the secondary. It's going to be about how fast he can find the players to run his defense.
Jeremy Pettis in the comment section, speaking of defensive coordinators, Jeremy's an Alabama fan. He said, I also wonder who Alabama's going to hire as its defensive coordinator. My assumption has always been they're just going to promote Tosh Lapoi.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times Alabama you think of as making one of these big, bold hires. Who's out there? I mean, what big-name defensive coordinator can you hire right now? I mean, there's not really a candidate floating out there that has really any kind of reasonable tie to a Saban whatsoever.
Well, and the truth of that matter is, too, that Nick Saban's usually prepared. He would have hired the guy if he was going to go. He would have hired somebody that was on the open market already if he was going to bring somebody in. I think it's Tosh Lapoi is the easy answer there.
Who, by the way, would almost universally be treated as a great hire because
he's recruiting.
That's the thing. He's cut from that same cloth. Pruitt and Smart are so similar. Kirby and Jeremy, I obviously mean. And Tosh Lapoi's right there in that same way. One of these rabid dog recruiters who's going to develop big-time relationships. And, Lapoi may not be able to, obviously he was able to step in with J.J. Peterson. That was too little too late. Maybe with Quay Walker, maybe the departure of Jeremy Pruitt hurts there. But you give Lapoi a year to sort of, reestablish new relationships. Alabama's going to recruit fine.
I think so. I think with Tosh Lapoi, and you mentioned he fits kind of in that same lineage under Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt of somebody that can really harbor these relationships with young guys. He's done a good job in his time there at Alabama.
By the way, this is not an official first and 10 topic, but it is something we need to mention. We're already seeing some of these announcements about guys going to the NFL, and some of these I'm going to have a hard time even keeping up with. I hope I don't leave any out there that are important. But a couple Alabama guys, I guess there's a report out there that Deshaun Hand is more than likely going to the NFL draft.
From everything, yeah, Deron Payne, Bo Scarborough, I think Calvin Ridley is already announced. I think a lot of people obviously expect Minka Fitzpatrick to announce, and Ronnie Harrison's one of those guys you could see kind of being on the fence, but it looks like Bama's going to have at least 5 announced for the draft.
Okay, so that's going on there. We'll try to keep up with some of these as these announcements kind of run in here with some of these guys making their announcements. For now, let's do item number 8 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of Jeremy Pruitt, the former Alabama defensive coordinator, now on his way to Tennessee. He is actually at Tennessee as the head coach. In fact, I thought Tennessee did a pretty cool thing on Twitter today, kind of showing video of Pruitt kind of arriving and reporting for work for the very first time. I know this is a sight for sore eyes for a lot of Tennessee fans. Let me show you Pruitt here showing up to the Knoxville facility, coming to work here for the first time, getting ready to get going. And Mike, for a lot of Tennessee fans, they're obviously thrilled about the idea of Pruitt being there and ready to kind of get focused. So you see him smiling coming off the elevator, the nice-looking Tennessee facility. Tennessee fans kind of excited about this, right?
They should be. I mean, think about the last couple of months that Tennessee fans have had. Butch Jones is fired. You have the whole Greg Schiano debacle. And Jeremy Pruitt finally, after a couple of, a long, extended, coaching process, you fire your AD. You hire Jeremy Pruitt, but he can't get onto campus until a month later because Bama wins the Sugar Bowl and obviously goes to the national championship. So I think it's a big deal for Jeremy Pruitt, and I think that obviously, him being welcomed on board, and you see this video, I think Tennessee fans are just breathing a sigh of relief, if nothing else.
Along those lines, the former Alabama running back Shaun Alexander had a great NFL career with the Seattle Seahawks, played on a team in Alabama with Jeremy Pruitt, and Mike Griffith in Atlanta for the national championship game caught up with Shaun Alexander, asked Shaun what he liked about Jeremy Pruitt, what do you think he brings to the table for Tennessee. Here's some of what Shaun Alexander had to say about that.
Started, I was with Coach Cochran, our strength coach. He was the yeller, and we both were sitting in the locker room. I think he was getting ready to play LSU, and he said, "Man, look at Jeremy. He's like, he's going to be a great head coach." He said he knows when to yell at the guys, he knows when to love on the guys, he knows when to high five the guys. That's who he is. But he was like that as a player, but he's still like that, and so he's going to do great. I mean, I wanted to do great except in October. But he's going to be phenomenal. What is he going to?
I like that line there. He's going to do great, except the third Saturday in October. Obviously, Shaun's still representing the Crimson Tide on that. But my question is, where is Mike Griffith there? The suit and tie on. You see that backdrop? That's like the fancy. I didn't know Atlanta had anything quite as fancy as that. Manicured landscaping, nice brick facade there. Look at those columns. You got the waterfall, swimming pool. Was it the Four Seasons? I had no idea that Mike traded in such high cotton type area.
Yeah, look, he's got the duds on. He's got the suit and tie. He's feeling really good. He's got Shaun Alexander in his back.
Well, you should know, by the way, that it was actually a big week for Mike Griffith, and we're super proud of him here at SEC Country. He's the recipient of a big award here, the Steve Ellis Beat Writer of the Year from the Football Writers Association of America. Mike's a guy that comes on SEC Country Live all the time. We like stirring it up with him and kind of going back and forth with him a little bit. But this is truly a tremendous honor for Mike, a great moment. Beat Writer of the Year, according to the Football Writers Association of America. I know you're awful proud of Mike. I know that I am.
Yeah, definitely. Mike is one of those guys that obviously, as a colleague of ours, that you have to value him because he tells you how he sees it through his own eyes. No matter what's going on in any situation, it's how he sees things, and that's what he's going to put on paper, and I think that's why a lot of Tennessee fans value him as well.
You buying what Shaun Alexander said a moment ago, though, that he could tell from Pruitt back then he was going to be a coach? I mean, did you see guys either in your pro or college career that you could look at and say, oh, yeah, that guy's going to be a coach?
Well, I don't know about players wise. I definitely knew some guys in the locker room, but I think what he brings up is an important point, and I think that's one of the reasons he's so successful recruiting. I think that's one of the reasons he's so successful and is well known in coaching circles is because he knows what guys want. He knows when to yell. He knows when not to yell. He knows how to talk to players. He can go into any different home. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter if you're in a mansion or in a one-bedroom apartment. He can go in there and make those relationships. I think that's what Shaun Alexander is kind of pointing to right there. Is saying Jeremy Pruitt knows how to read people, and I think that's a big skill when you talk about a head coach at a place like Tennessee.
All right, item number 9 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Drew Lock, the Missouri quarterback, has announced that he's returning for his senior season at Missouri, and boy, did he announce it. Take a look at this hype video here. It's a cool video. This may be too much. Y'all watch this. You tell me what you think. Take a look.
Lock, deep shot. That's how Drew Lock wanted to come out slinging. A prime time dime from Drew Lock.
You get the bag and fumble it, I get the bag and flip it and tumble it. Drop the top when it's cold, but you feel the heat. Be real with me, keep it 100, just be real with me. You get the bag I get the bag and flip it and tumble it. Drop the top when it's cold, but you feel the heat. Be real with me, keep it 100, just be real with me. You get the bag and fumble it, I get the bag and flip it and tumble it.
So that's kind of the thing from Drew Lock there, coming back for 2018. He's giving you the symbol. First of all, I mean, didn't Tom Herman just make fun of him for that symbol for a bowl game they lost?
Which, by the way, I hated from Tom Herman, so I love the fact that Drew Lock put it on his highlight video.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. And I feel like a hypocrite on this because I like hype videos. Yeah. I mean, I do. And Drew Lock's numbers are good. I'm probably going to have a hard time making my case on this one. But something about, for a team that may not even go to a bowl game next year, to have Drew Lock, making, these kind of bold proclamations about coming back. I mean, I hate to say this, but you're coming back to have Derek Dooley be your offensive coordinator.
Let them be excited. Let them be excited.
I just told you I feel like a jerk for even saying this, and I feel like I'm being a hypocrite because I'm the guy that loves the hype videos.
Yeah. I'm usually not, and I actually love this one.
Okay, that's fine. But, I mean, this is not, Johnny Unitas returning here. I mean,
well, he's probably the top quarterback in the SEC returning. I mean, when you look at his numbers, you look at his passer rating, you look at his completion percentage, he threw for almost 4,000 yards. Now, the Derek Dooley thing is a head scratcher for me. I thought that might push Drew Lock to go to the next level, but listen, the kid is Missouri football right now. He is everything. He's the cornerstone of that program right now. They have a bunch of big games ahead of them this year. I think they actually travel to Tuscaloosa this year, which could be an interesting matchup.
That's a good game, yeah.
I think that Drew Lock deserves a lot of praise for what he's done. I think he gets overlooked because he's at a place like Missouri and they have struggled, but I'm telling you right now, this is an electric quarterback, and I actually kind of like the hype video. I don't know what happened here. Like,
I feel like we have reverse roles.
Yeah, I don't know. I usually hate hype videos.
I guess my point is, and listen, there's a chance I'm just wrong about this, but to me, I mean, was Drew Lock going to be a first-round pick if he'd gone? Well, okay, so that's my point. It's like, you give me a hype video because you decided to forego the chance to be a fourth-round pick and be on, Jacksonville's practice squad. I mean, that seems like that seems like much ado about nothing.
There's something to be said about people that live in their own bubble. They follow their own program. They're fans the same way.
Yeah.
He's at Missouri, and he is Missouri football right now. So him putting out that hype video, he's just extending his brand a little bit, making it known that he's headed back, getting Missouri fans riled up.
Which is great. Missouri fans, I'm all for you. But the hype video would be received better by me had you beaten Averages Grits Texas.
Well, here's how I approach that. I think that you say, you don't even know if you're going to a bowl game next year. They definitely would not be going to a bowl game next year if not for Drew Lock. I think Drew Lock gives that fan base a lot of hope with what they can possibly do next year. Maybe Barry Odom saves his job for another year. Maybe Derek Dooley turns out to be some kind of incredible offensive coordinator. I'll have to see it to believe it. But, Drew Lock coming back at least gives them that opportunity.
Steve Weaver in the comment section says, I'm still irritated by the national championship game. That's why I'm being so hard on. Maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm salty. By the way, you will see Salty BA before the end of the show today. You're going to get a chance to see that.
Yes.
I will tell you I'm somewhat embarrassed by this. We'll do that here coming up in just a couple moments. Before that, item number 10 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we got a long list of, I hate to say newcomers because that's not quite the right way to say it, but that sort of middle tier of SEC team, at least based on the 2017 results, who could be making some noise in 2018. One of them may be Mississippi State, who did finish in the top 25 here in 2017, maybe even better than that this upcoming season. Here's what SEC Country's Brandon Walker said recently on the Mississippi State podcast. Here it is.
Mississippi State heads into 2018 with momentum. Thanks to that interim coaching staff, thanks to every player on the team. Winning the Tax Slayer Bowl in Jacksonville gave Mississippi State a needed shot of momentum. We had limped into the postseason. Losing Mullen, losing the Egg Bowl, we had limped in, but they gave us the momentum back. And now we head into 2018 with a tremendous amount of momentum, a tremendous amount of excitement for the season.
So that's Brandon Walker making his case for Mississippi State. Are they your top candidate to be a surprise team in 2018?
They've got to be up there. Listen, I don't know enough about Joe Moorhead as a head coach.
Yeah.
I think that's where really I have trouble drawing conclusions about what Mississippi State will be. Is he going to be one of those head coaches that's really good in his first year, or one of those guys that has kind of a rebuilding role in his first year? I think he has the pieces. I think that Nick Fitzgerald, you hope that his ankle comes back the way it is. If not, Keaton Thompson obviously played very well in the bowl game. You have a guy like Montez Sweat on the defensive side of the ball, 10.5 sacks. You don't see that much. There was only 3 guys that did the year before in the SEC. So he's got some pieces. I don't know what Joe Moorhead is as a coach, but I don't blame Brandon Walker for saying we are really excited in having built momentum beating a team like Louisville.
Bo Molinari says his team, Texas A&M, is going to be the surprise team ahead of Mississippi State. I have seen the Aggies, by the way, in some of these way too early top 25s the national writers are kind of putting out there. I mean, I think that A&M has a chance to be pretty good, and could I see them being better than Mississippi State? Maybe so, but if I'm going to compare, and I hate to go across divisions for this because it's a little bit hard to make the comparison, but I'd probably put a team like South Carolina above Texas A&M a bit here. I think that South Carolina is the second best team in the East.
I think they're really good. I definitely think they are. I think they're going to make a run at trying to do. I think next year is Will Muschamp's year as a South Carolina head coach. I think he's got a great opportunity to really make a lot of things work. I think I agree with you that if I'm comparing South Carolina and A&M right now, I'm probably putting South Carolina back. But I got to admit, with Nick Starkel possibly being at the helm, you have some different things going on. Jimbo Fisher obviously taking over the program. Texas A&M is definitely a team on the rise. I just don't know if they're a year away. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if we're waiting, if we're holding our breath for 2018 for Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think that, listen, by the way, Michael Clyburn, a Mississippi State fan, says A&M's terrible. We're going to beat them by 21 again. So Mississippi State fans feeling pretty good about their situation there. Jimbo Fisher, because he is an experienced coach, does he kind of circumvent the typical situation where a guy kind of slides in year one, there's a little bit of a growing pain? I mean, Jim McElwain kind of bucked that trend at Florida. They won the East in his first year with the Gators, although I think A&M fans would like the long-term prognosis for Jimbo to be a little bit better than it was for McElwain, maybe. I think it's an interesting point. We're obviously going to be talking a lot about these teams, South Carolina, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. They're all trying to make some noise here in the SEC, and I think I'd slot them all over teams like traditional, you may think of as more traditional powers, like LSU and Florida and Tennessee. The trio I just mentioned, State, A&M, South Carolina, are better than LSU, Tennessee, and Florida.
Yeah, I think this is what I mentioned. I think this is South Carolina's opportunity next year. And what is it, 233 days, I think, until kickoff for next year. By the way, some incredible opening weekend games again next year. But we have a ton of time to talk about it. I just think that South Carolina, I think this is an opportunity. Why Tennessee and Florida are the way they are, if you can knock off a team like Georgia, get some cross-division wins, I think that South Carolina could make a run.
All right, let's finish with this. Champion of life. We always close the show out the same way. Somebody mentioned me still being in a bad mood about the national championship game. On the floor of Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Monday night, I definitely was. I was doing what we call Dixie Vodka post-game show for DogNation.com, breaking down Georgia's loss. I wasn't in a good mood about it, as you might imagine. But what really irritates me is when somebody walked in front of what I think of as sacred space. The space between my face and the camera, that's sacred space. And somebody invaded my turf, and they got the evil eye for doing so. Take a look at this.
Was able to match up with them. Yeah, and I think maybe the main thing there is I don't think that stat would have been around at all.
Oh, no, don't do it.
I don't think that stat would have been around at all if
Look at this slow motion. Oh my God! If looks could kill, that guy right now is planning a funeral. I mean, that was
listen,
beautiful.
If you're entering the sideline, can you show a little respect for what's going on with the cameras? I mean, you don't walk between the white lines. That space between the white lines, that's my white lines right there.
I'm telling you right now.
Let's see this one more time.
What's funny is it's like you notice this guy, and you're like, oh man, what's about to happen? What's Bay looking at? Oh, there's the guy right there.
I love how I give him the second look back. Like, I mean, if looks could kill, this guy'd be 6 feet under right now.
There's no doubt.
I hope he's happy with himself. He's famous for 4 seconds for making an appearance on the Dixie Vodka post-game show. Jerry Lewis says he got video bombed. Yeah, we kind of did. A bit. And Shannon Burge is right. It's more of like a really, dude, really. That's kind of what that look, I think, kind of signifies there. Hey, thanks for being with us here today on SEC Country Live. Don't forget, got the podcast for you. We'll have it up for you immediately after the show right there on iTunes. You can check that out. We'd also love it if you'd share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know that here we are in the month of January, still having a great time talking about the SEC right here on SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow again at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.